How would a drug for schizophrenia work? To tackle this delicate matter, a team of Romanian researchers put together a multidisciplinary scientific approach. The answer may be found at the intersection of pharmacology, genetics, and protein and metabolism research. This study aims at discovering novel molecular targets. The main goal is to develop the next generation of drugs for schizophrenia. Meet a team of scientists who plan to break misconceptions on molecular level.
What is the novelty that your project introduced?
So the novelty of our project is that we are searching for new targets for this horrible disease that is schizophrenia, and we are looking at molecular sensors that facilitate neurons to interact with the extracellular medium and help neurons to communicate to each other.
How does your project achieve a multidisciplinary understanding of schizophrenia and identify novel therapeutic targets?
We know that schizophrenia is a very complex disease, affects 1% of the human population, and it's a typical disease for humans. We don't find a corresponding disease in other animals, like for instance we have with diabetes or other diseases. So this is a disease typical for humans, and it's a complex condition that affects the patients in multiple ways, socially, physically, and of course we would look at a very complicated and etiologically complex disease that needs to be addressed using different approaches. Our project is based on integrating different areas of expertises from molecular pharmacology and cellular biology, working together also with animal genetics, animal models, and using data from human samples, because it's important to know that, for instance, mouse models are very useful to prove that some drugs and targets are relevant, whereas in schizophrenia we would need human samples. And our partners at the University of Oslo provided us with large data sets from human patients suffering with schizophrenia. They did a global analysis of gene expression in healthy patients and compared to those that suffer from schizophrenia. And it's interesting that we found three genes that that seems to be to have expression levels altered in patients with schizophrenia. And it's interesting that these genes have unknown functions up to now. So the idea would be to clarify and to identify the biological roles of these three genes.
Could you share any preliminary results from your research?
Our data we obtained so far indicate that at least one of the genes that we know that has unclear biological roles, it's really important in the metabolism of mice. And also human results from sequencing indicate that indeed this function of the gene is also relevant in humans. For another target, we identified that it may belong to the large family of adrenergic receptors, which is a very, very interesting feature.
In the context of drug development for schizophrenia, how does the project envision translating the discovered compounds with modulatory properties into lead compounds for the next generation of drugs? And what criteria will be used to prioritize and advance these compounds in the drug development pipeline?
So our project focuses on the identification of modulators of these three unknown genes. And the idea is to start screening large number of compounds, either compounds that are actually on the market and used for different diseases, or libraries containing human metabolites, because we know that there must be something that activates and modulates the activity of these unknown genes. Now, how we translate that into a lead compound? Of course, the first thing is to identify what we call a hit. Right? So a hit is a substance that is able to specifically activate or inhibit the target gene. Furthermore, we would look for a family of scaffolds that are able to do the same thing on the target receptor. Now, how we go forward with this is basically we would examine the selectivity of these substances, because these unknown genes, of course, are related to other genes, and we want to target only a particular receptor. We don't want to target multiple receptors using a substance because, of course, of the side effects. So we examine those hits in terms of their specificity, and also in terms of potency, how potent they can activate or inhibit the targets. And then from that on, of course, it's the medicinal chemistry field that improves the chemical scaffold of the compound by adding or removing certain parts of the chemical substances. We are speaking now about the chemical substances, but we might have what we call peptides, that are amino acids, right? And they can have biological effects, and then sure we can look to improve the efficacy and the potency of these modulators.
Working with a diverse team and collaborating internationally with esteemed institutions like University of Oslo, Faculty of Medicine, Institute of Clinical Medicine, and Cantacuzino Institute, what advantages or benefits does this partnership bring to your project and team?
We need information from different areas. And that's very important that we have this consortium that consists of a University of Oslo, Institute of Clinical Medicine, that provide us with data from human samples comparing healthy and schizophrenic patients, that we know what to look for in the human genome, what genes are modified in schizophrenic patients. Then, with this information, we use this information to translate into a pharmacological cellular-based assay to characterize these targets they identified. Of course, we can't go in human experiments. We can't test the compounds we find in humans. So for that, we have animal models from Cantacuzino Institute, where we can try to see whether the genes they identified in Oslo have roles in the neuronal function in mice, on general metabolism of mice. And for that, we generated mice that lack these genes. And we analyze each of these mouse lines for different parameters like behavior, metabolism, aging, how do they perform in terms of aging or metabolic parameters when they don't have that particular gene.
What is the social impact of your project?
Sorin has told you before about the 3 orphan receptors that we work with and what orphans are. These 3 particularly were found by our Norwegian associates to be, their expression levels are different in schizophrenic patients. So we think they might be involved in schizophrenia. Schizophrenia affects about 1% of the population right now, and a lot of them, I think more than 60% of the patients, don't actually receive any form of treatment. And in those that do receive treatment, only about 50% actually see any improvements. For the rest of them, the medication doesn't really work. So the medication is quite old, we could say, quite outdated and not very effective. Besides that, the patients experience about 3 categories of symptoms, and the medication that exists right now on the market is not effective for all 3 of them. Usually only 1 category is targeted. So you could see how it's quite important for us to find either new medication or new targets for the existing medications to treat these patients. So we are looking to find out more about these 3 receptors in the idea that they could be potential new targets in schizophrenia, and so we would target them with either the existing medication, perhaps it's more efficient on these new targets, or we could find new pharmacological compounds that could work on them, because when we find out more about the structure of these 3 receptors, people who work in pharma or who work with creating models for these receptors could find new medication that could target them.
In the end, what should people remember about your project?
People should remember that we know a few things about our human body, our physiology and pathology, and like my colleague Theodora said, the current medication targeting the central nervous system for schizophrenia or depression or anxiety is very limited with lots of side effects, and in our mission we want to identify novel modulators for orphan genes, expand our knowledge about our physiology and pathology, and hopefully in the end of our mission develop novel and better drugs.
Thank you for watching Research in the Spotlight, a podcast for scientists and passionate science people made under the EEA Grants Research Programme by the Executive Agency for Higher Education, Research, Development and Innovation Funding as program operator. Until the next time, like and share this episode if you think science is our key to a better future.